Welcome to Humble Ground, a podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the stories that feed the world. Behind every meal is a farmer, a rancher, and a legacy of hard work. Here, we shine a light on their journeys, their challenges, and their triumphs, because every meal has a story, and it's time we heard it.
Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of Humble Ground. We're just continuing telling great stories, and this one's probably going to be one of my favorites. I took a long shot on a company that is the world's largest in the category that they are in, and was fortunate enough to get an opportunity. So the biggest thing you can do to help us out is to follow us, to share the content, to do that stuff. We're going to continue to travel and tell these stories. I'm going to follow Five Rivers. I'll put all their links. Incredible social media presence, very active in promoting beef and statistics and things of that nature. But without further ado, I want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Can you give us a little bit of background on you, and then we'll dive into Five Rivers?
Yeah, well, we're happy to do it. We are huge on telling the beef story. My name is Kim Rounds. I've been here at Five Rivers since 2018. And I have been given, for some reason, they trust me to tell their story. I have pretty open creative license to tell the story of Five Rivers on all of our social media platforms, on TikTok. That's how we got connected. And I threw it up to our management team and said, hey, this guy wants to do a podcast and talk about us and do some video. And they said, well, I guess if you get uncomfy, just tell them the interview's over. So not that I expect that at all, but Five Rivers Cattle Feeding, like you said, is the world's largest cattle feeder. We have across all 13 locations about a 980,000 head capacity. That's when we're full. We're not full right now. It's winter and the market's been a little bit different for us for this last year, but we feed cattle. They're with us for about 6 months at a time, and we market those cattle as fed beef to packing plants. So they are from the stage from cow-calf producers between them and the beef plant. That's where we have them.
Did it always start in Colorado, or where was kind of the base? Because obviously it's grown, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but did it always start in Colorado?
So it had two companies that sort of started and emerged around the same time. We like to tie our roots back to the Monfort family. They're the ones who built the yard that we're at today. They're the ones who kind of helped pioneer cattle feeding. A lot of it was going on around the same time. They started by grazing crop residues, and then they built the world's first 100,000 head feed yard. So that ties all the way back to the 40s in Colorado, and then the 50s, 60s, 70s, what we'd consider our southern yards, so our Texas yards. Those were built as Conti beef, and so those kind of developed separately and then eventually came together at a certain point.
No, it's incredible. We had just got done doing a tour, and if you've never been to a 100,000 head feedlot, it takes quite a long time to get through it. But it's awesome because, like, as we were talking, like, beef is everywhere, and without this many, it's hard to feed the world realistically, or hard to feed the country. And so it's so cool to actually see it in person. Tell us a little bit geographically, where all are you located at, and what's that look like to make up the 980? And I'm not asking for specifics of what yards have what, but where do you cover geographically?
So we're in kind of this stretch from eastern Colorado down to the Texas Panhandle. That's where most of our feed yards are. The reason they're there is because it's really dry. Dry environment's great for cattle feeding. We don't have to fight mud as often. We still do. We fight Mother Nature every day. But it's really dry there. And then we've got access to corn in the Corn Belt. As you go a little bit further east of us, you have access to cattle, that kind of Montana to Texas corridor, pretty thick with cattle. So in the 40s and 50s, 60s, when cattle feeding was a little bit different than it is today, and trucking was a little different than it is today, they were kind of blossomed in that area, and most large cattle feeders are going to be there. That's where we are. So we're in eastern Colorado today, Kersey to be exact. If you blink, you'll miss it, but that's where we are. And then we have kind of two outliers. We have one in Malta, Idaho, and then one in southern Arizona. So that's kind of all of our locations where we're at.
Tell me a little bit about why Arizona and why Idaho. Those seem like outliers from the rest of them. Is that just because great opportunity came up, or is that what was the advantage to doing those two outside?
I know that McElhaney, so our Arizona yard, was acquired after everything else, and it's definitely a different model. They're more dairy-based. They've got a longer feed time. It's obviously a lot hotter there. But I think just access to water, the town is called Welton, so they had a lot of water there, and there was just an opportunity to acquire that yard. And then Idaho is actually one of our older yards. I'm not sure exactly how that one got brought in, but I know that it was considered part of the northern yards when we all came together.
You were telling a story about the one in Arizona. They must have a lot of water. How many cuttings of alfalfa do they get?
I was told they get 12 cuttings of alfalfa a year, which is just insane to me. I can't wrap my head around that.
That's all you do all year round, I feel like, just to keep up with just
cut hay.
Hey, could be worse things to do.
Yeah, exactly. Could be buying hay all year long, which would be a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, so going into that, I had a lot of people ask questions about, does each yard operated as its own yard, or is everything like one total, like, hey, everybody buys, and like how individualized is it, or is it all like we all do this process and we buy from this person, or is it kind of each yard does their own thing to an extent?
So we've always said that the secret recipe for us is our autonomous nature. So each feed yard acts as its own enterprise, and the manager of that yard and the management team of that yard are given license within bounds to buy their own cattle, their own corn, their own commodities. Most of their hiring and firing is all done in-house. And so we even have kind of a company-wide, we call it the scoreboard. We talk about who's outperforming who, and, we kind of get to be a little bit competitive, but we all know we're working towards the same goal, which is the profitability of our company. We're all operating on the same difficult game of margins and making money. But that's the cool part about our company. We get to build relationships in our communities. We get to buy from the same ranchers, the same farmers year after year, and build relationships and be plugged into our communities. There isn't a corporate office. Not that there's anything wrong with this. It's just how we do it. There's not a corporate office who's buying corn and sending it here and buying cattle and sending them there. We get to make those relationships and wheel those deals ourselves, which is nice to be able to come back to the same people year after year and have a relationship with them.
Sure. So how many of the cattle are actually Five Rivers cattle as compared to custom fed for other operations?
It definitely varies yard by yard. There are some that specialize way more in what we'd call custom feeding, some that are nearly 100% company owned, but across the entire company, we're about 80 to 90% owned cattle, so cattle that Five Rivers own and purchased, and then about 10 to 20% customer cattle, so cattle that people own that they are paying us to feed and then we'll capitalize on when they sell them to the packing plant.
Getting back to, I guess, the farming side, one of the first questions I had was how much farming does Five Rivers do for their own, or as compared to buying corn? So could you give us a rundown of like how much you guys actually do, whether that be this lot or total, whether that's corn or whether that's alfalfa or whatever that is? How many of that is actually Five Rivers farmed as compared to bought?
It's almost a negligible percent that we own. We own some farm ground, and it depends on the yard. Again, I'm just trying to speak on behalf of 13 different locations.
No,
but
I get it. Yeah.
Most of them own a little bit of farm ground, and a lot of that is for water dispersal. We are responsible for every single drop of water that falls in this facility, can go back into public water supply. And so one of the ways that we retain that is to use it for irrigation. That will come back in our way as corn silage or maybe harvested corn, normally corn silage. But pretty much everything that we buy is going to come from farmers or contracted. I know that for this facility that we're at in Kersey today, all of the corn silage that we put up comes from about a 12-mile radius of this facility.
Yeah, and you'd say most facilities is hauled in corn and hauled in silage?
Yeah, I'd say most of it is going to be that way. The amount that we have to feed, we'd be full-time farmers the other way just to make it happen.
Throw us through some numbers. Got an awesome tour. I appreciate both of you giving us the tour because we learned a ton, which is obviously what we're going to talk about. But how much got fed here yesterday? And then this is probably, you times that by 8 or 10, and that's company-wide. So for numbers perspective, I know a bunch of people have asked me. So we're going to run through some numbers, and I'm not sticking to you perfect numbers, but how much got fed here yesterday at this 100,000 head lot?
We fed about 2.4 million pounds of feed here yesterday, and we've got about 80,000 head on feed. So when we're full at capacity, 100,000 head, we're feeding about 4 million pounds of feed a day. That's what our mill can make going full bore everything wide open. That's what we can make and feed and deliver every day. And we make what we feed at our facilities every day as well. So that's what our mill's making, and that's what our feed truck drivers are delivering.
So it's safe to say if everything was at capacity at 980,000 head, you'd be in the ballpark of 40 million pounds a day of feed.
Yeah, I mean, again, it varies pretty wildly. Southern cattle are going to be different than northern cattle. I think I did the math per head one time, and it was about 25 million pounds as fed a day across the company.
365 days a year.
365 days a year.
Yeah, we'll let you all do the math on that because I don't know that my phone calculator will keep up with that. How many people does it take to keep this moving every day?
So I'll talk about this facility. It has about 55 to 60 full-time employees, and they're spread across our departments. So each department kind of has its own specialty. Feed makes feed calls. They decide who's getting ration changes, how much they're getting fed, delivering the feed. The mill is receiving commodities, making all of the feed that we feed every day, testing and sampling for quality. The cattle department, they're overseeing animal health. They're shipping, they're receiving, they're treating, they're the pen riders. And then yard department, they're making sure literally the whole thing stays operational. They're managing all of our rolling stock, they're welding, they're managing water, all of our environmental issues, and then our office staff that do all the paperwork, make sure we get paid, everybody else gets paid. So it takes all of those team members spread across those departments, and then across the entire company, including our corporate office, we've got about 600 full-time employees at Five Rivers.
It's crazy that the numbers that you think about, and we'll get into some that are even crazier than these. How, I know you had said you do a ton of recruiting. How are you getting new people here, and then across such a diverse geographic profile, how are you partnering with colleges that have animal program? Like, what's your method to get people? And if it's a secret sauce, I don't want to. But I'm just thinking for people that watch this to say, man, I really want to go work for them because it seems like you have a ton of opportunity.
Yeah.
I guess speak to a little bit about the recruiting side of things.
Yeah, so that's my job now is hopefully to find a secret sauce because there's not one. We do a lot of recruiting at colleges and universities, specifically ag colleges. Not that you need to be an ag major to come work for us. I think a lot of our folks who work here have pretty cool stories that maybe they had a little dabble in ag, maybe through FFA or 4-H, but didn't necessarily come from big ag, and now they are our management team. And so we're kind of looking for anybody who's interested. I've always said you can teach someone how to drive a feed truck. You can teach someone how to, make a ration, but you can't teach people how to be passionate for this industry. And so we're looking for people who are interested in doing this. And it's a fun and noble calling, and there are hard days, and there are easy days, and there are fun days, and there are not fun days. Like you said, it's 365 days a year. So like I've driven a feed truck on Christmas. I've driven a feed truck on Thanksgiving. Mainly so that our guys have time to go home. I say guys, our people have time to go home and be with their families. But just going and recruiting and trying to share our story, it's a big part of our social media presence. We have kind of 3-prong approach to social media, and one of those is recruitment and retention. So thanking the people who do what they do every day and make it possible, and then also trying to find people who want to come work for us. So if you're interested, come find us.
There you go. Like I said, we'll put all the links because I think it is. It's hard work. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But to know just how much beef goes back out into people's tables and restaurants and grocery stores and all of that kind of stuff is just incredible. Do you have a number of how many bushels of corn in a day or a year come through just this facility? And then obviously, you can take that 8 or 10 times probably.
So the number I was given, because I did do my homework before we came in here, so I didn't mess it up. We go through about 1.5 million bushels a week. So about 70 to 80 million bushels a year. And each facility on average gets about 20 truckloads of corn a day. So there's some math. A lot of zeros.
A lot of zeros. Yeah. And then, like I said, you get silage. I mean, just the amount of commodities that come into this place, and then obviously get fed every day is crazy. We got to see that where they come in, and my boys were fascinated. I would say their heads just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and the crew running that was incredibly efficient. How many did you say come through here a day?
We ship and receive about 5,000 a week. So we're receiving about 1,000 a day. When they're processing 5 days a week, they'll do about 1,400 through that facility every day.
And that's just at one facility.
Just at one facility.
It's absolutely incredible to see just, again, what goes into it every single day, and the people that you have that are committed to doing that. I had a couple people ask about more on the vet and the medicine side. Talk about how you guys approach that. Is that all subcontracted out? Do you actually have team members? What's your vet and medicine look like? Because obviously 980,000 animals is a lot of animals, and in feedlot scenarios, that's something you have to stay up on all the time. How do you guys approach that?
Yeah, animal health is obviously huge. If you want to make money, you have to keep them alive. You have to keep them healthy enough to be gaining weight. So we have 2 staff veterinarians, so 2 DVMs that we share across the entire company. We've got kind of a northern vet and a southern vet. And they make monthly visits to the feed yards. If we have any anomalies or anything that's odd that we can't really explain or that we have questions about, they'll come out and visit and give us a ton of insight. But they train what we would call our vet techs or our cattle doctors. And so it takes kind of the whole team to make it work. And how we do it is our pen riders ride pens every day. They're each responsible for, depends on the yard. I'm going to use here as an example, about 10 to 12,000 head that they're riding through per person per day. And they're pulling what they think looks sick. So they're looking for clinical and subclinical signs of being sick. And they're driving those cattle to what we'd call the hospital. They're turning in a card that says what they pulled from each pen and why. And then our vet techs or our cattle doctors, who are people who've been trained by our vet to administer antibiotics or treatments of whatever it may be, they'll bring those cattle into the chute. They'll look at the information of where those calves came from, how much they weigh, what their temp is, what their symptoms are. And then our vets work on an algorithm that says, based on all this information, here's what we're going to treat them with and why. Because we're big on judicious use of antibiotics. We can't give every single thing as much. We talked about this earlier. Antibiotics are one of the most expensive inputs we've got. So using them accurately, timely, and judiciously are incredibly important to us. So that's our vet's big oversight, is those algorithms and updating with current information, with the season, the time of year, where the cattle came from, what types of diseases we're treating. That's a big part of their day, is just overseeing all of that and answering those questions. So we've got DVMs, but also what we'd consider our vet techs or our cattle doctors.
It was so neat to hear. My background actually is in software development out of high school. And so to hear that you all have your own software system, because let's be honest, if you have that many animals and this much going on, a package system probably isn't going to work super well for this particular operation. And so then using AI and things like that to actually say, hey, it's got this symptom, it's likely this. That is so cool to just use technology to make more informed and efficient business decisions. Talk a little bit about, I think, what you have for Draxxin on hand. I had a couple guys ask, because they're like, man, we use these vials, and I know how much that costs. I can only imagine. And again, I think people jump to instantly that we always are just, jabbing animals and doing this stuff just willy-nilly, whereas you're right. It's not cheap to treat anything. And so you're not going to treat it unless it has to be treated. I would assume it's probably the case. How much do you have to have on hand just in case?
I think Mary said we keep enough for 8 cc's for 5,000 head on site at all times. And that's, again, just this facility. So it's a lot. And the Draxxin price has come down because the patent wore off, but still not cheap. That's our most expensive input, is antibiotics. Plus, you think about treating an animal. You have to send a pen rider into a pen. They have to ride that pen. They have to identify the sick animal. They have to drive that animal out of the pen on horseback. They have to then take that animal to the hospital. The vet techs have to show up. They have to run that animal into the chute. They have to temp it. They have to weigh it. Then they have to administer antibiotics. They have to tag it with a tag that says that it was treated, its withdrawal date from the antibiotic, and then take it back home. The cowboys then have to drive that animal back to its home pen. It's a lot of labor to treat an animal, and obviously we're not going to let anything go sick. We have to have them healthy, but we're definitely not just jabbing stuff willy-nilly. It takes a lot of labor and a lot of effort and a lot of conscious decision to treat a sick animal.
So speaking of animal health, this is a thing that I think people in the feedlot industry or whatever take a horrible rap for. And it's part of the reason why we're here to do this, is to debunk a lot of that. Again, people are still going to comment. That is what it is. What is your death loss company-wide? Because I think that number is incredibly small for as many animals that are here.
Yeah. For the year, it's about 0.28 to 0.3%. And there's some ways we mitigate that number. We ship some chronically sick animals before they, die on the feed yard. There's some ugliness to it. Stuff gets sick. If you're in a city of 100,000 people are going to get sick. But yeah, we're pretty proud of that number, really. I mean, it's not fun to talk about anything dying, but we're pretty proud of that number, and we have a team that works hard to keep it there.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is you have people that are just so dedicated to that every single day of making sure animals are as healthy as they possibly can be. Like, not just letting them lay out there and suffer, like knowing that you have people ride pins all the time to make sure that doesn't happen, I think is incredible.
Yeah. You think about the number of eyes on these cattle. So we've got pen riders whose job is to ride through them and look for sick animals. We've got a guy who's doing shipping and receiving, who's looking for animals that are ready to ship. Maybe if something needs to be moved. You've got feed truck drivers who are driving the pen every day. You've got people who are driving, looking at feed rations if they need to increase or decrease feed. You've got the yard department who are looking for broken water tanks or busted fences. The amount of eyes that these cattle have on them, it's pretty amazing. And you can send a text and say, hey, I saw something that didn't look right in this pen, and a cowboy will be there as soon as possible. So you think about, there's a lot of animals, but there's a lot of eyes on them too.
No, and it's awesome. I'd like to shift into statistics that just blew my mind realistically when I started doing the math on beef production. I love what you do for marketing and proving that beef is a great source of protein and all this stuff, and beef, the promotion of beef doesn't happen enough, in my opinion. Everybody wants to knock the beef industry, but I feel like it needs to be promoted. And so give us some numbers around, because it sounds like you and the interns go through this every year, around the actual amount of beef that gets produced here in a year.
Yeah. So if we look at the whole company, we market about 1.8 million head of fat cattle a year. And so you market 1.8 million. And you get, let's just say, roughly 65% yield. So that's going to go on to be beef. You think about the average U.S. consumer eats, I don't know how many pounds of beef a year, but you think about how many million people we feed every year. It's a pretty fun number to look at.
Oh, it's crazy. I was doing the math and telling the boys, I'm like, boys, they're in the billion, over a billion, probably 1.5 billion pounds a year of finished beef.
Yeah.
Just that number, just to think about what that is, and then I think what you all do is truly incredible and appreciated, and probably not appreciated enough. One of the things that when I was going through, you've got a great section on your website about giving back and doing things that ag companies historically have done a great job of giving back, whether that be FFA, whether it be 4-H, whether that be whatever. You all have partnered in a program called Beef Sticks for Backpacks. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what that is, what's the purpose, and how you all play into that.
Yeah, so we were involved in a program similar to this in Texas, and then Beef Sticks for Backpacks was kind of born of that, to be in Colorado and be near our corporate office. And so there are kids who obviously depend on school for 2 meals a day, and unknown if they're getting a meal at home. And that means that those kids are probably without food on the weekends. So there are these backpack programs that exist that send kids home with food on the weekends to make sure that they have food. Well, a lot of those have to be shelf stable. So it's a lot of carbs, it's a lot of fats, but it's really hard to get protein that's shelf stable, but we can make beef sticks. And so to fill that protein gap, we partnered with a lot of local ag companies, a lot of local beef companies, and with Colorado State University, and they make all of those beef sticks every day and distribute them to kids on the weekends who need beef sticks. I think this year we're close to 300,000 that we distributed since its inception in 2019, about 3 million beef sticks. And it's something that we're just passionate about feeding kids. We just want to make sure that the people who need food have food, and especially kids whose brains and bodies are developing and need food to focus in school and be healthy, that they have access to beef. And so we're really excited about being able to be a part of that, and that so many people jumped on board. A lot of companies get bad raps for things that they do, but I think that agriculture as a whole is pretty quick to rally and make sure that our communities are cared for. I know JBS donates all of the trim to go into those beef sticks, and then they're made at CSU by students, and then they're distributed to local kids in need.
It's incredible to think about, taking, and giving back that much is truly incredible, and I think people need to hear it because, again, agriculture usually just gets a bad rap for whatever it is. So to hear the good and how you can, use beef or use other products to give back to people in need is truly incredible. I guess when it comes to, I had a lot of people asking about when they leave your yard, do you do the processing? How's the processing work for people that probably don't understand that particular process? Does Five Rivers process, or does that get sent to a house somewhere else and they do the processing?
So they're sold either, depends on how you want to do the math and what yard it goes or what packing plant it goes to, but they're sold either on the hoof or hanging weight at the plant. So we're just one sector. We typically own them from the time they come through the gates, 80 to 90% of them. We own for the time they come through the gates until they go to the packing plant. And our goal is to have them gain weight and be high quality beef, and we get paid basically on how high quality they are, how good our yield is, all of that at the packing plant. So once they leave our gates, they go on to be beef and be distributed by whoever it is that purchased them, whether it's JBS or Cargill or whatever other packing plant they may go to. We're just kind of our one specialized sector, and then we sell them from here.
What's the future look like for Five Rivers? Are you going to get over 1 million head? Is there talks of expansion, or are you guys pretty happy with where you're at?
We'll see. It's always an opportunity. We have a pretty strategic investment strategy on if an opportunity to grow comes up, great. I know a few years ago we purchased 2 much smaller yards that were not very typical for us. And so there are definitely some growing pains, and some we're still going through by adding those to our system. We've expanded before, we've got smaller before, so I'm not going to say never, and I'm not going to say that we're buying something tomorrow. There aren't any plans in the works right now. For us right now, I think the concept of being able to just kind of expand and push our brand, because the future is uncertain sometimes, and be poised to make a strategic move. But no, there's nothing crazy or exciting in the works right now. Just doing what we do best right now with what we've got.
What's your favorite part? You've been here for quite a few years. What's your favorite part of being a part of something like this and being in agriculture?
The people. And it sounds so corny to say it because everyone talks about it, but I am so lucky that with my job running the social media and now recruiting that I get to travel. I've been to almost all of our facilities. I've met a ton of people, whether they are a new hire intern, whether they've been driving a feed truck for 40 years, whether they are managing the entire company. Everybody here is such a good person. And I think that's what agriculture tends to attract. Again, we get a bad rap, which I have a hard time understanding, but I see the comments, so I guess we do. People do what they do because they're passionate about it. Nobody's getting rich here. We're comfortable, but nobody's getting rich here. And we're doing it because we love it. And so everybody I've met, pen riders, feed truck drivers, department managers, our executive team, they're all such good people. And I love it. I love the cattle too. They're fun. They're what I take the most pictures of. But the people really make it worth it. And finding people who've been with the company. I know that, shout out to Donna Hendren. She's retiring after, I think, 47 years with the company. She's
Wow.
our longest held employee. She's retiring in 2 days. So it's just so exciting to see that that's not even a one-off story. We have several people. She had to hold on long enough to beat out 2 other people that had to retire so she could hold on to her title.
Perfect.
But it's the people. They're so fun. They're such good people. They're so fun to interact with every day, and the insight that they have and the backgrounds. We're all from different places. We all have different connections to agriculture and what we like most about our job. Raimundo in the mill here, he's been here a long time, deathly afraid of cattle. That's why he's in the mill. He likes to be up high above them, nowhere near the pen. And then you have people who that's all they want to do is be around the cattle every day. But we're all part of the same big wheel that keeps turning.
And it's an impressive wheel. When we drove by, we got in later last night, and the sun was going down, and we're driving by, and I think I looked it up on the map. I think this lot's got to be like 2.25 miles long by 3/4 of a mile wide.
It's pretty accurate.
Pretty pretty impressive setup, clean facility. We got to tour the whole thing and go through it, and just to see what it takes to feed 100,000, and then you say, oh, by the way, we're 10 times bigger than that across all of our places, is just incredible. And you really seem to, I think you hit the nail on the head. You have a lot of people that are really dedicated to feeding animals and making sure they're healthy so that you can get quality beef out the door and on people's plates at the end of the day. And so is there anything else you'd love to touch on as far as Five Rivers goes? I know I've asked a ton of questions, and I appreciate you putting up with all of my questions, but anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I think I just kind of want to circle back to the people, bringing humanity to these large entities. People love to think of us as this big faceless monster, but we're made up of 600 individuals who feed their families by working here, who are passionate about what they do every day. And same thing with where we get our corn and our cattle. People like to look at, well, this is one big endpoint and one big bottleneck where all these cattle come. But we buy from ranchers. We buy from people who have 10 head down the road. The guy that I named my son after, he'd truck us in a gooseneck load of 10 head every year. And then we have people who we buy thousands from every day. And so the average producer in the U.S. only has 40 head. So there are only so many 1,000 head producers we can buy from. We are buying from small ranchers, and we're putting together groups that make sense for us. We're in the game of making money, but we have to buy cattle to stay in business. And so we're supporting ranchers of all sizes, of all backgrounds, of all walks of life and specialties. And I think that that's kind of a fun part of our story, is that it gets lost in how big we are, but we're buying the cattle and paying the bills and being the yearly income for so many ranchers coast to coast. I think we buy from just about every state in the U.S. So that's kind of a fun part of the story that I get to touch on, is where these cattle come from and who they support when we buy them.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think you're right. People probably don't think about that. They probably think you're the enemy at the end of the day, but I think it all plays together. My father-in-law and I, we were probably 35 or 40, not anything crazy, but to know that, we could have sold to you all, and it all plays together, and everybody can make their living or do whatever they need to do, I think is a great point to add. I guess speaking of buying, do you have buyers that buy for you, or is that actually Five Rivers employees that do all of the buying? That seems like that would be a lot to try to keep up with.
It's a little bit of a mix with how big video sales are now. We get to do a lot of the buying ourselves. We have a team member who's kind of out and about in the country, who's kind of keeping an eye on stuff and what we'd call like in-sale barns. And then we have some folks who will buy and then sell to us. So we don't really have anybody who's out buying except for our one team member. Everyone else is kind of keeping an eye on it in-house. But they'll buy the cattle and then sell them to us. So we have people who are kind of authorized to put together groups for us. But ultimately they have to foot the bill until we buy them. So we have a lot of people who say, I'd love to buy cattle for you. I'm like, that'd be a pretty sweet job. I'd love that too, but it's not really a job that's out there right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. Well, anything else you want to talk about? I'd love to pick your brain sometime on social media, but I don't know. That's probably a conversation that's not on here, because you and I both know how people can be keyboard warriors about anything in agriculture. Just seems to get the bad rap on everything for some weird reason. I would like to encourage people to maybe go visit a feedlot. Maybe you do a ton of tours here. I'm not saying show up to the door, because they have a lot going on, but go visit a dairy, go visit a feedlot, go visit these places. They're not as bad as you think they are. And actually get your own answers. I mean, like coming here, I've been to a lot of feedlots, small, big, doesn't matter. The cleanliness here and how you treat things and the processes that you have in place to make sure the animals are as well fed and as healthy and all of this stuff as possible is top notch. And so I think people need to get out and see it, not just drive by and go, oh, they're such bad people because they put animals in pens. Yeah. Without feedlots, realistically, we're talking 1 billion pounds plus a year. That's a lot of beef that without just Five Rivers, let alone any of the other feedlots in the world, you kind of have to have it. And so I think you all do a first-class job of making sure that everything is done properly. And I can't thank you all enough for that. And I can't thank you enough for giving us an opportunity. and giving us a tour and taking the time, because I know you have a lot of things going on. So that.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to do it. We are pretty big on, we'll throw our gates open and kind of share the story as much as possible. We've talked about it earlier. There's good, there's bad, there's ugly, and that's the truth to all of it, to every single industry, whether it's growing food or treating people or everything. It's all good, bad, and ugly. And the more that we can shed light on the parts that maybe historically we've tried not to talk about, like death loss, that's something that we talked about that a lot of people would want to shy away from, but in reality, it's a number that we're proud of. And when we share that number, people are surprised. And we do a lot of tours, especially at this facility. It's just conveniently located. And I would say I have way more people come in, arms up, ready to fight about what we do here. A lot of them are in the food consumer kind of side of the industry. A lot of like restaurants and grocery stores and people who are ready to have a fight about what we do. And I say, just hold off on the fight till we do the tour. And once they get done with the tour, they all have this enlightening moment of, that was nowhere near as bad as I thought. I'm impressed. The cattle have more care. I mean, they have a nutritionist and a doctor full time. I don't see a nutritionist, and the cattle do every day. I don't have a GP that I see every day, but the cattle have one that care for them. So I think that's kind of a fun part of the story, and a fun part of doing the tours that we do, is the amount of perception that we get to actually impact. And I know for us on social media, we get a lot of crazy people, but we always cater to the middle. Everything in life is a bell curve. You have people who are going to be for us no matter what we do. You have people who are going to be against us no matter what we do. Most people fall somewhere in that shade of gray in the middle, and those are the people we're always trying to talk to, whether we're responding to comments, we're sharing facts, we're always trying to approach those people in the middle, because I know the first thing I do when I see a good TikTok, I look at the comment section, and if there's someone who's being relatively level-headed, granted I've flown off the handle a few times and had my less desirable moments, but for the most part, we're trying to share information to those people in the middle who are coming to us for information. They think that we should be the source. We're the source of the beef. We should be the source of the info about beef too, right? So I try to always cater my comments to those people in the middle. I try to share facts. I try to be pleasant even when I don't want to be, and kind of share to those people in the middle in that shade of gray who maybe want to buy beef but aren't sure if it's safe. They want to feed their kids, but is this the best choice? They want to support their local rancher, but are they if they buy beef from the grocery store? And I kind of want to be the voice of reason for people who have those questions.
And I think that's awesome. My biggest thing when it comes to people on comments is we can agree to disagree realistically. And like I said, there's good, bad, and ugly, so you're never going to get away from that. But if somebody comes and asks a question and just wants honest communication and honest answers, they might not like the answer, but at least they're willing to have the conversation. And I think, like I said, I've read through a lot of your comments. You do a great job of not falling into it'd be really easy to, because there's going to be people that just bash and bash and bash, and there's nothing you can say to make them happy. But I think agriculture, we are doing a better job of educational, and I think that's all we can do, because at the end of the day, if we can inform people of facts, and we can open our arms and say, hey, just come check it out, like, you're at least offering it to them. And then if they choose to not, have that conversation or come see you, then that is what it is. But ag's not this place that's got this big something to hide, and we're doing shady stuff. It's just really we're trying to raise animals, or trying to grow a crop, or trying to do whatever and feed the world at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
my friend Marky, she says it best. She runs the account Girls Eat Beef Too, and she said, be a gate getter. Make sure that we aren't being these gatekeepers in the industry, that we're sharing it, that we're opening it up to people who aren't a part of it, growing up, or who have interest in it now. Try to be a gate getter. Let those people in. Let them know what life is like here. Let them feel like they can be involved. And I've always kind of kept that in the back of my mind as I'm replying to those comments. It's like, be a gate getter. Don't be a gatekeeper. And ironically, some of our most hate comes from within our own industry, which I find wild, but that's who we are. But the amount of people who you can even appeal to with a logical comment, like, hate breeds hate. So if you can reply with a logical comment, I have a lot of people go, oh, wow, I never knew that. I just assumed that. And then you reply with something logical, and they're like, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. So if I can change one person's mind, I'm happy.
Perfect. No, and I think that's a great thing to end on. I want to, again, thank you, and obviously upper management and the entire company for giving us an opportunity and look forward to just, again, telling more stories. And the story of Five Rivers is truly incredible in what you've done and what you do on a daily basis. And so I want to say thank you. For everybody watching, thank you for watching. I will put links to Five Rivers social media, which is awesome. So go check them out, follow them. Again, if you're ever out here, take an opportunity to go by. Like I said, it's 365 days a year, so there's always stuff going on. And again, for us, subscribe, like, share, whatever, because we're just trying to tell stories in agriculture because there are so many great ones, and yours is one of those. So I want to say thank you, and hopefully you all watch and share it with your friends, and stay tuned for the next one.